What did you learn building the MCU that you applied here, and what you decide consciously maybe not to apply?
That's interesting. I don't know. I haven't thought about it this way.
We've all heard stories of the Mandalorian bounty hunter and a child.
Hi, John.
Hi.
Well, first of all, congratulations for the movie. I have just watched 30 minutes and was the best 30 minutes of my life. I have.
Oh, that's very nice of you.
This is the first Star Wars film in 7 years that we are going to see in theaters, and we know this fandom is perhaps one of the most passionate and beautiful in all of cinema, but also one of the most demanding. How do you carry that responsibility, and at what point in the process did you feel it the most?
I've worked. First of all, I grew up watching Star Wars from the first film. And I remember by the time Return of the Jedi came out, and I was an usher in the movie theater in high school, there was already people with different opinions of which one they like better. It happened with the Mad Max movies. It happened with Marvel. I'm a part of Marvel. I think you have to keep in mind is that when you have these many stories told over time, people create connections with these characters. And so they're invested in what happens next, but they don't know what's going to happen next. And so as a filmmaker, you have to understand that this is different than working on a film that comes out of my imagination. I'm inheriting something and I'm looking after it, and then somebody's going to be telling these stories after me. And Dave Filoni has been really helpful because he's worked closely with George for over a decade, and he's worked in all different genres of Star Wars, and he understands how people are going to feel as we make different creative choices. I think at the end of the day, I feel very fortunate that in this very crowded landscape of stories being told and everything competing for your attention, that people still hold Star Wars very dear. And so with that comes a responsibility to make sure that you tell them a good story.
You mentioned Marvel, and I want to ask you, you directed Iron Man and Iron Man 2, the films that literally launched the MCU, one of the most beloved cinematic universe in history. And now you are in Mandalorian and Grogu, in the most iconic saga in the history of cinema, I would say. What did you learn building the MCU that you applied here, and what you decide consciously maybe not to apply?
That's interesting. I don't know. I haven't thought about it this way, but let me think for a moment. I think I've had the experience of working with characters that are original or not very well known, and you have a lot of freedom with that. And then there are characters that are established and everybody knows everything about them, and it's much more confining. And I think that there's a sweet spot. I think I was very lucky with Iron Man. Even though everybody knows who Iron Man is now, at the time, a lot of people didn't even know the character. People who knew the books knew, but there's a lot of people who are like, oh, that's a Black Sabbath song. That's a character. He wasn't on the level of Batman, Superman, right, Spider-Man. So we had a lot of freedom. But we also knew that if we stayed true to what was in the books, you have the core fans. And I think what I learned there is that there were a lot of Marvel movies before the MCU where the Hollywood studios didn't necessarily pay that much attention to what existed in the comic books. They wanted to tell a story for a fresh audience. They figure that audience is coming anyway. But Avi and Kevin and everybody at Marvel said, with the MCU, let's start with the fans who've been there since the beginning. And you start with the base, the core fans, and then you build out from there. And I learned a lot from them and that approach, because the more true we stayed to Iron Man, the more we kept the fans, getting them more engaged. And then you invited new people in, and then the story grew. And there's a lot of people who are fans now that met these characters through the movies. And I think with Star Wars, same thing. You have certain very established characters that you have very, very strict parameters. But when you invent new characters like this, I have a lot of room to do what I want to. And so I get the freedom of original characters within Star Wars, as long as I keep it feeling tonally like Star Wars. And I work with people who understand Star Wars at Lucasfilm, and people who have been working for 8 years on the show and on the films. So that's the trick. The trick is to really understand it through the eyes of the fans.
And now they both are fan favorites, so
they are, yeah.
Was an amazing job. And I will ask a final question, and there are no wrong answers here. Maybe controversial ones, but not wrong. Which is your favorite film in the Star Wars franchise, and why?
Favorite one is the first one, because that was the one that I remember. I was young. I was born in '66, so I was about 10. And the first shot blew my mind. And even though to my father, maybe the plot was predictable as a fairy tale, to me, everything was a surprise. Even Yoda's reveal was a surprise. Darth Vader's relationship to Luke Skywalker is a surprise. I was the audience for that. And even though I could argue that Empire Strikes Back is probably, you could argue that that's the best. For me, it's the one I was opened my eyes to at first. I loved all the stop motion Phil Tippett work. I've grown to appreciate all of them, but I think much like music, it's when you're of the right age, it's you still connect with the music that you grew up with. And the Star Wars I grew up with was not the first one, which was called Star Wars. Now it's called A New Hope, and I stand by that.
Well, thank you very much. It was amazing talking to you, and I can't wait to see the whole movie. I'm so excited.
Yes, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Pleasure talking to you.
Bye.
This is the way.